What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again, once again. So I'm going to start this off with apparently a controversial opinion, if my Twitter timeline is to be believed. Somehow, someway, Season of Opulence is both the best piece of DLC in the Season Pass and the worst piece of DLC in the Season Pass. To say that it's a mixed bag so far would be an understatement. It's like getting one of those big bags of candy at Halloween, and maybe 50 or 75% of it is candy that nobody likes. But the rest, oh ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, the rest is your favorite candy in the fucking world, whatever that may be. Yeah, I think that's a good analogy to describe Season of Opulence so far. And I do mean so far, because it could get better, it could get a lot worse. We don't know. We still have an entire season to go through. So let's go ahead and get the bad stuff out of the way first. Because once we get through that, I'm going to talk about what is quite possibly the most amazing, best, awesome thing that Bungie has ever added to Destiny. The Chalice. Chalice of Opulence. And the menagerie. So, I figured go ahead and bite the bullet, get the bad stuff out of the way first, take out the trash before you can go play, eat your vegetables before you can have dessert, however you want to strangle this metaphor to death and leave it lying at the bottom of the lake. So, the three aspects that I was highly unimpressed with so far are the lore, the truth quest line, and the raid. Starting from the top. What the actual fuck is this? For those of you who are just listening and not watching the video, what is on your screen is a lore tab. Because we're going to talk about the lore first. I tend to be really partial to the lore, if you haven't noticed. What we are presented here with the Season of Opulence lore is literal Callus fanfiction. Literal Callus fan, that is a sentence. That is something that exists now. That is canon. That is within the Destiny universe. Callus had fanfiction written about himself and us. Callus has fanfiction written about himself and us in the Destiny universe, and this is canon. Oh dear Lord God, no why. For anybody who's new to the channel, when I talk about the Queen of the Awoken lore added in Forsaken, I often jokingly call it Morozov fanfiction, and it kind of is. Morozov was so beautiful in these lore entries that Jur Ido, who swore a blood oath of vengeance against Morozov, upon seeing her, couldn't do it because she was just too beautiful, and Jur Ido could not contain her boner for Mara. And you know what? I kind of get it. In the Taken King cinematic, Mara is cute as fuck. It's like kind of Moe Mara-chan, going on there. I was like, okay, you know what? I feel you, big dog, on your wolf. That said, if you swear a blood oath to end somebody's life, maybe you should, I don't know, end their life. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility, as something you should do. Another instance we see within the Mara lore is with Skolas. Skolas says that he underestimated Morozov because she doesn't show the world her successes, and all her failures, as she states in Taken King, is part of the plan. Meaning, Mara is not only the most beautiful woman in all of existence, but she is the smartest person introduced in the entire series. She is playing 36D chess, and the rest of us are nothing more than Neanderthals playing with 2 sticks and a rock. And we have to share the fucking rock. And then there's the fact that her only personal conflict boils down to everybody thinks she's a goddess. Yeah, I absolutely hate what they've done to one of my favorite characters from Destiny 1. In Destiny 1, she had this kind of badass, I earned what I got warrior thing about her. In D2, they are trying way too hard with the character, and it kind of makes her a Mary Sue. Anyways, I always joke about how her lore reads like bad fan fiction. Well, somebody at Bungie apparently took that way too seriously, and now we have Callus fan fiction. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being hyperbolic. This is literal Callus fan fiction. Let me go ahead and give you a quote. I have foreseen the end of all things, the Navina, the awoken queen, the sad, strange little man on his rickety boat. They believe they've seen the same. What they don't know will destroy them. 1142-2. Forthcoming. Recorded by under scribe Shapal. Thus did the Emperor of all joys tenderly slay his beloved Shadow of Earth. The neutrinos left in the hour phase could be counted on one human hand. Then, the Shadow of Earth knelt before the Emperor, and with great courage and loving dignity, said to the Emperor, "My good and generous host, what you have longed for has come to pass. Do me the honor of letting me grant your last and truest wish." With tears in his eyes, Emperor Callus spoke the last words that a living being will ever hear say to another living being. "This I grant you." And then there's a plus sign. I'm not even joking. There's a plus sign, and at the end of the lore tab, there's an annotation. There's literally an annotation from the scribe writing this in the lore tab, which reads, "As there will be no scribe employed at this future date, the last scribe shall consult with Emperor Callus as to our sovereign's planned remarks. Delete this footnote as close to the actualization of this history as possible." The lore card continues after the plus annotation. "And our merciful emperor slew his shadow of shadows, the young wolf, the slayer of oryx, the shadow of earth. Thus did the emperor reserve the right to be the last. And when the end came, he met it with the body of the shadow in his arms, his belly rumbling with joyous laughter." Ow. 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 It's just so stupid. Make it stop. Callus literally thinks he's gonna kill the player character. Not only is he gonna kill the player character, but the player character is just gonna turn over and be like, "Lord Emperor Callus, please do me the honor of allowing you to kill me. Please, do it for me. For you, for me, for you. Please." It's just so stupid. It's literally fan fiction. There are literally footnotes to correct the fan fiction in the future to get it accurate to what Callus believes is the fan fiction that he is writing with this. But why? Why is this a thing? And you know what? I will grant you, this actually is not out of character for Callus. At the same time, with all this new lore being basically fan fiction, even if there are hints of truth within it, much like the Truth to Power books, it's all useless because it's told to us by an unreliable narrator who is literally making shit up. And while it is entertaining, I will give it that. That was cute. Like, that was kind of funny. Like, Callus thinks he's gonna kill. Okay, yeah. What delusions? Much grandeur. That doesn't detract from the fact that it's basically 50 entries of useless lore. In fact, the only revelation that we really get here is that all of the Callus lore is probably just as useless. But moving forward. So when I talk about truth, I need people to understand that I am separating the weapon from the quest. The weapon in and of itself is just silly. It is so fun. It is just silly though. Like, this is silly. Truth, in and of itself, is a lot of fun in both Crucible and Gambit. Oddly though, it's balanced so that it pretty much sucks in PvE. The quest itself, however, might as well not exist. It consists of nothing more than basically half an hour to an hour of loading into different planetary spaces and killing things. Once you've claimed your 250 Cabal scalps, just do the Warden of Nothing strike, and you get your gun. Bada bing, bada boom, done. This continues Bungie's annoying practice of free exotic quests being this amazing elaborate thing like Whisper, Thunderlord, Outbreak, but the paid for content being relatively phoned in. I mean, at this point, they might as well just hand you the exotic the day the DLC releases. Because, yeah, go kill 250 things, go grind Crucible for an hour, go do this, that, and the other. Quests that really have no thought put into them. And yet, that's what Thorn was, that's what Last Word was, and that's what Truth is. Personally, I'm getting a little sick of these free quests being vastly superior to the content that people are actually paying for. This is not to say that Bungie needs to stop these elaborate quests for free exotics. However, paid for content, things that people are actually paying for, should be just as good, if not better. It makes no sense that the paid for content is the equivalent of go kill 500 things in different ways, but the free quests are these really cool story-rich dungeons where you go into it and you reclaim an old exotic. Like, how much sense does that actually make? Why is the content that is free way better than the premium, air quote, premium content? That just, what? Why? It doesn't make sense. And the Truth Quest has to be the most egregious offender of all of them, because at least the other ones had lore books and they had a story. This kind of has a story, but basically it's go kill like 500 things in different ways and then go do the Warden of Nothing strike, and that's it. It's not that compelling, it's not that interesting, there's not a lot to it. I will give the sandbox and the design team credit where credit is due, however. Truth is just silly. It is just enjoyable, it is silly. It doesn't even feel overpowered. Like, when I get killed by it in the Crucible, I'm like, yeah, you know what, that's what that does. Unlike, say, something like Wardcliff Coil, which has 18,000 tracking rockets that fire from it and kill everyone on the map at all times. And then we come to the raid, and boy, oh fucking boy. If my Twitter's any indication, this raid is divisive. I've seen a lot of content creators talk about how they personally are not a fan of it, but there does seem to be this overly vocal minority that really loves this raid, and are ready to fight you on a moment's notice if you dissent, even the slightest. Because remember, having an opinion is bad, or something like that. And to be clear, I'm not saying vocal minority in if you like this raid, you are in the minority. No. I think there's only a couple of people that are like really hardcore defenders of this raid, and they are willing, ready, and able to fight you at any time. I think most people are like me, like, oh, you don't like it? Okay, okay, whatever, that's cool. You do you. Or in my case, I don't like it, and you tell me you like it, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm happy for you. Enjoy. But since this is my channel and my opinion, and I'm reviewing this content, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you why I, personally, do not like Crown of Sorrows. Isn't it just kind of weird that you have to lead in with the my opinion disclaimer? Like, isn't that weird? People get offended over opinions that aren't offensive. I guess it's because we live in a society. But anyways, moving forward, enough digressions. Crown of Sorrow, the raid lair marketed as a full-blown raid. In Crown of Sorrows, you have 4 encounters that consist of using a blessing buff to basically do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, with slight variations relative to the type of encounter. Personally, I find the blessing mechanic to be an artificial inflation of difficulty, to increase the challenge of what would otherwise be a slightly long strike. Bungie has always flirted with artificial or fake difficulty, which is a term that refers to how some games use cheap methods to make segments more difficult, for the sake of making the player lose or get a game over more often. A great example that I don't think anyone's going to argue with is the blackout modifier on the riposte segment of the Menagerie. Like, who exactly thought that was a good idea? Like, the encounter is full of melee bosses, and this modifier makes it to where they can one-shot melee me, and then I have to take a sword and run up to a bunch of these dudes, especially the ogres, and get ground pounded while trying to down their shields with a sword while a modifier is active that actively punishes me for getting meleeed. What? That is categorically the definition of artificial difficulty. It's not hard because it's actually hard, it's hard because there's this modifier that says, go fuck yourself. Another large offender when it comes to fake difficulty is instant death timers. This is a huge thing throughout Destiny. The difficulty doesn't come from the task or the encounter at hand, but from the artificial inflation of difficulty created by the timer. This can be good or bad when utilized properly. It can create tension, but more often than not, it's just arbitrarily there to punish players for not doing X, Y, and Z fast enough. When you play Dark Souls, arguably some of the most difficult games there is, you are provided with a learning experience. The boss fight is something you can overcome with the tools at your disposal by learning the patterns of the boss. The idea is basically with every fight in every Souls game, the player is given a set of behaviors, patterns, and they're allowed to take on the boss any way they want, just as long as they learn these patterns and can overcome them. Destiny isn't like that. Destiny is way more regimented. You have to do X, then Y, then Z, in a compressed time limit, and any deviation from doing X, Y, and Z in that time limit will result in instant failure. Meaning you didn't die because you lost to the boss, you died because the timer ran out. Now, don't get me wrong, Destiny and raids have always had this kind of issue. Crown of Sorrows is nothing new. But in Crown of Sorrows, we see this issue magnified and grossly on display. And it's probably because the baton pass mechanic and the punishment mechanic are one and the same. And it feels like the punishment mechanic was tacked onto the baton pass mechanic as an afterthought in order to make it harder, because it wasn't hard enough. And you could remove this mechanic entirely, and the raid would still be playable. Sure, it would be kind of downgraded into a large strike, but largely it would be unchanged. And to be absolutely positively clear to anybody out there who thinks I'm just bitching, there's actually a large difference between saying something is artificially difficult and it actually being hard. The reason I'm talking so much about the blessing mechanic is because, really, it's all the raid has, making Crown of Sorrows feel really one note and kind of uninspired. This one mechanic follows you from the time you enter the raid to the time you leave the raid. Some of the best raids in Destiny all have lots of diverse gameplay. Do they recycle things occasionally? Yeah, sure. But even Crota's End, which was commonly referred to as a glorified strike, had more diversity in gameplay than Crown of Sorrows has. In Crota's End, you have the lamp maze, you have building the bridge, you have the Death Singer, you have Crota. And like I said, Crota's End was commonly referred to as a glorified strike. And yet, somehow, it was more diverse than Crown of Sorrows, which basically uses the exact same mechanic from start to finish, only in slightly different scenarios. If you really want to look at raids that had a really good balance of fighting enemies or doing mechanics, look at Vault of Glass, look at Wrath of the Machine, look at King's Fall. Though a lot of people will argue, and I agree, that King's Fall was super heavy on the mechanics, at least it had a lot of diverse gameplay. And I know what somebody out there is typing frantically in the comments below. But Joker! It's a raid lair! It's a small raid! It's not fair to compare it to Vault of Glass and Wrath of the Machine and King's Fall! No, fuck that. Bungie marketed this as a full raid, not a raid lair. So if they're going to market it as a full-blown raid, I am going to compare it to other full-blown raids. I don't think that's disingenuous, I don't think that's unfair, especially when I said Scourge of the Past was a raid lair, and so it wasn't worth the money that you were spending on it. People got mad because it was a raid, not a raid lair. So make up your mind, people in the comment section who get offended about stuff like this. Is it a raid? Is it a raid lair? If it's a raid, then I'm going to judge it against other raids. If it's a raid lair, I'm going to talk about what we'll call Bungie's selective marketing. All of that said, let's go ahead and play devil's advocate for a moment. I do think that the artificial difficulty of a lot of Destiny 2's raids does come from the unfortunate side effect of having a hyper-competent raid community and the very nature of Destiny being an FPS. There's only so much Bungie can do with that, and ultimately they are very limited. The primary limitation being with how the player interacts with the world. This is why we see raids now depend more and more on mechanics that instantly kill players for not doing XYZ in an exact order in an exact time limit, or adding levels of complexity that don't necessarily enhance the experience, but are there purely to punish the player. This is opposed to giving players different behaviors to learn, like Dark Souls, and allowing the player to tackle defeating the enemy in any way they see fit once they've learned that behavior. On top of that, and because of that, Destiny 2 really lacks those hero moments where one player can save an entire raid group from wiping. In Destiny 2, if a player dies, depending on how far you are into an encounter, you might as well just wipe and start over. All of that said, a lot of this could be forgiven if the raid was worth doing at all. The raid has 5 weapons, and all of them underwhelming to say the least. Do you want another 80 rounds per minute shotgun? Well, here you go. Do you desire an AR that does basic bitch AR things, which is basically nothing unless it's an exotic, and even then still? Well, Crown of Sorrows has you covered. Do you want another scout rifle that will sit in your vault, waiting for the day that scout rifles actually, maybe one day, hopefully become decent? Well, Crown of Sorrows has that too. Do you want a poor man's recluse, only worse? Because not only is it worse, but it takes up an exotic slot? Well, come on down, Crown of Sorrows has you covered. The only remotely interesting piece of loot in the raid is a machine gun that can roll Firefly. But as cool as that is, for maybe ad clear, it's still not a great heavy option. There are far better ones. Even the raid armor is not safe from being irrelevant. Sure, it has 2 mod slots and can roll enhanced perks, but that'll be irrelevant once Shadowkeep comes out and the armor system is completely overhauled. And 2, the Menagerie armor can slot 2 mods and get enhanced perks. And I can choose the classification of mobile, heavy, or recovery for it. Even the Iron Banner armor can now roll 2 mods and enhance perks, or at least it looks like it in the database it can. So there is that. So outside of, I guess, the looks, if you like the way the raid armor looks, and hey, more power to you if you do, the raid armor has nothing unique to offer, nothing that I can't get elsewhere for far less trouble. Now, why is this important? Why am I putting so much emphasis on the loot and the quality of this raid? Well, Destiny is an investment game, first and foremost. And the reason for having pinnacle activities like a raid is to give players something to strive for, aspirational content. That aspirational content isn't very aspirational if it's all stick and no carrot. Outside the experience of doing Crown of Sorrows for the experience and collectors who want to collect everything, there's really no reason to go back into the raid. And this has been a huge problem with the way Bungie has handled loot outside the main releases for every raid since the start of Destiny 2. And this lackluster loot and the way that they handle it severely diminishes raid replayability. But you know what? Enough about the bad stuff in this DLC. Let's talk about quite possibly 2 of the best additions, not just to Destiny 2, but the entire Destiny franchise. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, I present to you the greatest thing that Bungie has ever added to Destiny, ever. Like, ever. The greatest thing ever that they have ever added to Destiny. And I know that's repetitive, but it's true. The Chalice of Opulence. Now, I wonder why I like it so much.
Ever considered you might make a good hive?
It could have nothing to do with the loot. Absolutely nothing. Nothing whatsoever. One of the largest struggles Destiny has had to deal with for basically the entirety of its life cycle was loot. Too much RNG, not enough RNG, then we got static rolls, and static rolls basically killed loot and loot grind. Then we got random rolls back, but with a diminished perk pool. Then we got forges, which were great. It was a great way to go and directly farm what you wanted. But then we got Season of the Drifter, and that was not a great way to go farm what you wanted. The hunt for a god roll should be part of the game. However, the weapons need to drop enough that it doesn't feel like a daunting, insurmountable task. More so because when it does inevitably drop, it's not going to be a god roll, it's going to be a kick in the gut. When you've played for hours and hours and hours, if not days and weeks, and you finally see that thing that you're searching for drop, and it's a dud, that's not a good feeling. So, in comes the Season of Opulence with the Chalice of Opulence. And the Chalice of Opulence provides some really cool features. First, it provides 2 initial passive grinds. The grinds for runes and the grinds for Imperials. Runes are a currency that's used to determine what loot you get, and Imperials allow you to upgrade the Chalice of Opulence. Once you get power and efficiency 2, Imperials can drop randomly from any playlist activity, so Gambit, Crucible, Strikes. All of this grind is relatively passive. It's stuff that you can work on while you work towards other stuff. And that's amazing. Towards the end of Season of the Drifter, I became really disenchanted with the Gambit Reckoning loop. More so because, like, what were you doing? I mean, you'd go play Gambit, you'd get all these tokens, and then you'd take them into the Reckoning, and all you could get was armor. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, I guess, maybe, but I really want a shotgun. I really want the last man standing with whatever I figured the god roll is at the time. And you could grind, and you could grind, and you can grind, and you can grind, and you can grind, and you can grind, and you could grind even more! And you'd never even see one of the fuckers drop. Here in Season of Opulence, anytime I play a playlist activity, it's going towards that grind for whatever god roll from the menagerie I want today. So it really gives players the freedom to do what they want, to work towards a goal, but then it's like also, hey, we do have this menagerie activity, we do want you to play it, but we're giving you reasons to play it because the loot here is so amazing. So everything just kind of feeds back into itself. So not only does this add control over grinding specific pieces of loot, for example, I farmed 26 of the hand cannons in my quest for a god roll at the time of writing this script, but because you have such control over what gear you're going to be rewarded, you can use this as a method for filling the holes in the loot that you have when you're leveling up. Because you can say, well, I get X number of powerful gear from the chalice, and I need a new chest piece because I've done everything and I didn't get a chest piece, so let me put in the code for a chest piece and grind out a chest piece. And that's really fucking cool. In fact, because you can do that, because you have that flexibility, this activity is never going to be irrelevant. Yes, it will see some decline because people will get all the loot, but in the next DLC, well, man, I need that chest piece. I didn't get a chest piece. I did all my other powerful gear and did not get a chest piece. Well, now I can specifically drop a chest piece. Or I can specifically drop a helmet or legs or a hand cannon or a special or a heavy. I can do what I want. I can get what I need. I can fill out those slots. That is fucking amazing. That freedom to get what you need needs to be across all of Destiny. Just period, bar none, end of discussion. This is such a great feature. I mean, think about it. How cool would it be if you could take a prime engram to Master Raoul and be like, okay, here's this prime engram, and I want a chest piece, or I want a primary, or I want a special, or I want boots, or I want a class item. That would be so fucking cool. And that's essentially what you can do here. So essentially the sheer functionality of the chalice to the leveling process is irreplaceable. It's so fucking amazing, it's so good. Oh my god, I can't believe we didn't have something like this before. And yes, I know people will argue that's how the forges were used. But technically speaking, you couldn't control what armor you got. So if you needed a class item, you couldn't control that. This is what the forges did for leveling, only across the board. On top of the utility of leveling up, the loot pool is also incredibly diverse. Not only is there 10 new exclusive weapons to this activity, but then you also have armor, and you have things like the Aarontel FR4, which is the best fusion rifle in the game. You have Duskrock Blues. You have the Gambit hand cannon. Just to name a few highlights. You can go, I want a range masterwork on a Duskrock Blues at all times. I don't want a Duskrock Blues to drop without range, and you can do that. That is so fucking amazing. You can go, I want my Aarontel FR4 to only ever drop with a stability masterwork, and you can do that. That is so fucking amazing. This is a great system. This needs to just be the default system across all of Destiny loot. Because all the facets that make up the investment system that is the chalice, all the loot you can draw from, the way that you can passively acquire the tokens to grind for that loot, all of that huge investment system makes Destiny this huge investment game that it wasn't before. Yes, Destiny was an investment game, but this is like next level. This is everything I'm doing, virtually speaking, goes towards the evolution of my character. And that is fucking amazing. Bungie needs to do this more. They knocked it out of the fucking park with the chalice. And if we were to talk about the menagerie for a moment, the menagerie just adds a level of gameplay, a suite of gameplay per se, that is unrivaled. Is unrivaled in all of Destiny outside of maybe the Leviathan raid. Because you're never doing the exact same thing once a run. Yes, there's only 6 or 7 different activities depending on how you want to split it, if you want to count the lamps, and there seems to be a bunch of bosses. So there is that. The menagerie actually offers more and better gameplay than the fucking raid. How insane is that? The easy to do, unfailable matchmaking activity is way better, way more fleshed out, way more involved than the fucking raid. It has a better investment game. It has better encounters. This is fucking awesome. Yes, it sucks for the raid that the raid is nowhere near as good, and maybe the raid would have been better if it didn't come out alongside Menagerie, but it has Menagerie to compete with, and that is the reality of the situation. And the Menagerie is fucking amazing. My only point of contention when it comes to the Menagerie is that it is unfailable. But when you do have a 6-man match-made activity, that's really the only way you can do it without frustrating everybody involved. Anyways, point being, I love the Menagerie, I love the Chalice of Opulence, I think they are the best things added to Destiny. And I do sort of feel bad for the raid because the raid has to come out beside that, and it's not a terribly great raid to begin with, and it's coming out beside this really amazing innovation for Destiny. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's a raid, that's great, I guess, but there's the Chalice of Opulence and the Menagerie. I could be doing that, or I could be doing the raid. I could be getting cool loot, I could be grinding for an awesome hand cannon, or I could, I guess, get an auto rifle or a scout rifle. Scout rifles are okay, I guess, maybe eventually one day they will be. But, yeah, I feel bad for the raid, I really do. But, and the lore, you know, the lore is somewhat frustrating because as a lore nerd, it's totally unreliable. It really is, so there is that. But I'm not going to say Season of Opulence so far is bad, because like I said, it brought forth the best thing to ever be added to Destiny ever, and it will continue to be a future thing, even if they don't innovate on it, which they should. They should add more encounters to the Menagerie. They should add more loot to the Chalice of Opulence. That's just, they should do that. That's just a thing that should happen. But even if they don't, it will still be relevant because it does have that power gear aspect where I can go in and get my powerful gear for the exact slot that I need it in. And that functionality in and of itself will always be relevant. But hey, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. And like always, stay frosty. Also, the Menagerie is fucking amazing. The Chalice is amazing. I love it. So good. Please do more of this, Bungie. You knocked it out of the fucking park with this. Do more of it. I love it when you do stuff that makes me happy and excited, because then I get to react really happy and excited, and then maybe it throws a monkey wrench in the narrative that I'm just a Bungie Destiny hater, which I'm not. I just hate it when you do stupid shit, but when you do shit like this, when it's cool, when it's fun, when it's amazing, I love it. Do more of this, please. Thank you. Bye.